Hey, what's up everybody? This is C.L.S. All-in-One. In today's video, I will show you how to repair and replace the negative battery cable for numerous larger GM vehicles, years 2007 through 2014. The vehicle I'll be working on today is the Cadillac Escalade, but this cable also works with a few other vehicles, such as the Chevy Avalanche, the Chevy Silverado 1500, the GMC Sierra 1500, the Chevy Suburban, and the GMC Yukon. So I was having a lot of battery and weird electrical issues with my truck. The first issue was that my battery would only hold a charge for about a week. Then it just kept getting worse and worse, to the point where sometimes my radio would just turn off while driving. And even after a full night of charging the battery, my truck would end up dead within inside of half of a day. So I tested the alternator first, and it checked out fine. Then I tested the battery, and it also checked out fine after a full charge. So I then began to inspect the battery cables and found out that my negative cable where it connects to the engine block was literally holding on by just a few strands of wire. In fact, when I grabbed this cable to see if it was loose, it just completely ripped apart at the end of the cable. So this cable is obviously a huge issue, and it was keeping my battery from being able to charge properly. Now, I'm not saying this is going to be your issue with your vehicle, but it's definitely worth checking out. Another reason to replace the cables would be corrosion. If there's any corrosion present on either end of the cable where it connects, this can also cause a weak connection and give your charging system issues. Sometimes this corrosion can be cleaned with just baking soda and water, but in some situations, it might be better to just replace the cable. So to start off with, I'll show you how I repaired this cable first. Then, I will show you how to just replace this cable as well. Before starting any repairs with the battery cables, I'll start with disconnecting the battery on the negative battery terminal first, then the positive battery terminal. So if you follow the negative battery cable, you will see that it branches off into 3 different ends, but the largest gauge wire is the wire you want to follow. For my vehicle, this wire connects right to the engine block, just below the oil fill on the passenger side, located right here. To disconnect this terminal, I used a 15mm end wrench, and there may be some other wires grounded here as well. So here's a look at my badly damaged negative ground cable, which just broke apart while inspecting it. Now what I'm going to do is strip about 5/8 of an inch of the rubber coating off the end of this cable, and for this, I just used a utility knife. Now I will use a 2-gauge battery terminal end and slide this onto the end of the exposed cable. Then use some heavy-duty wire crimpers to secure this terminal onto the cable. And down below in the description, you will find links to the same parts I used in this video. Now it's time to reconnect this terminal end to the engine block, along with any other wires that connect at this location as well.
Okay, I've got the battery all hooked back up. I fixed the ground right down there. So now it's time to start the truck and see if this actually fixed it. So my truck's been dead for over a week now. Yeah, it works, finally. It's had kind of a weak start for a long time. I think that battery cable's been damaged for quite a while. It sounds much stronger when it starts now. Yeah, that sounds like it should.
Now I will show you how to replace the negative ground cable. So this is kind of an odd cable. It has one terminal on the battery end, and from there, it branches off into 3 different ends. 1 wire harness, 1 larger gauge wire terminal, and 1 smaller gauge wire terminal. Before starting any cable repairs, I will disconnect the battery first, starting with the negative side, then the positive side. And for this, I used a ratchet with a short extension and a 10mm socket. Now, if you follow the negative cable away from the battery, you will run into a wire harness that needs to be unplugged. And the cable may also be clipped to a bracket in this location as well, which should pop off fairly easy. From this point, there are still 2 cables to follow, one small and one large. If you follow the large cable, it should route to the front of the engine block right here, located just under the oil fill on the passenger side. And this can be disconnected with a 15mm wrench. And again, there may be more than one wire or a cable connected to this grounding point, so just make sure to keep track of all the wires so you can reconnect them the same way. Now, if you follow the smaller cable on the negative battery cable, you will find a few clips that secure this portion of the cable that need to be unclipped. One just above the passenger front shock, and one on top of the chassis just behind the radiator on the passenger side. To access the end of this smaller cable, I found that the easiest route was to go through the wheel well right here on the front passenger side. There's just a couple small 8mm bolts and a few plastic rivets holding this portion of the wheel well together. And I only unfastened just a small portion of this well to gain access to the end of this cable. Now if we take a look at the inside here, you can see where the end of the cable leads to, but you will not be able to see the actual end of this cable because it's in a very tight area. However, I was able to get a shot of the end of this cable with my camera. So the end of this cable is secured with a 10mm bolt, and I was able to use a small ratchet to remove this bolt, but since I could not see this bolt with my eye, I had to just feel with my hand to get my ratchet in the correct place. And here it is with the bolt removed, and take note here, there is more than one wire that's connected at this grounding point as well. I would also like to mention that the end of this cable is in a terrible location. Now it's time to completely remove the entire negative battery cable, and you want to make sure during this step that there's no clips still holding the cable in position. So here's a look at the negative battery cable that I just removed. And here is the new cable. So this end of the cable connects to the front passenger side of the engine block, and this connects to the wire harness, and this end connects to the front passenger side of the chassis. Now it's time to install the new negative battery cable, which goes in the same way it came out, only in reverse. If you take a look here, you will see a fastener that clips to a bracket that's located right beside the battery. This secures really easy. You just have to line it up with the hole and then push it in place. And now I can grab my wire harness and go ahead and plug that in. And this harness can only plug in one direction, so there's no way to mix it up. Then I route the rest of the negative cable under the AC line like this, then connect the larger terminal end to the front of the engine block on the passenger side, along with any other cables that connect to this ground as well. Now I can route the smaller end of the negative cable down along the top of the chassis on the passenger side. This portion of the cable will have 2 clips. This first one will connect right above the front shock. And this second one will connect on the top of the chassis, right behind the radiator. So the red arrow right here indicates where the cable will be routed. And here it is after routing the cable. Now it's time to access the end of the cable through the wheel well. So there's the end of the cable, and now I need to route this around the back side of the body mount. Then secure it in place along with any other ground cables with the 10mm head bolt. Now I can go ahead and assemble the wheel well back together with the 8mm bolts and the plastic rivets. The plastic rivets are pretty easy to use, but they can also break fairly easy, so don't be surprised if you have to go buy a few new rivets. Now it's time to hook the battery back up, positive first, then ground, and these take a 10mm socket to tighten. And now it's finally time for a test to make sure everything works.
Yeah, it works, finally.
Okay, it's now time for me to go. If you liked this video, if you could, hit that like button and please subscribe. And have yourself a great day, and I'll see you next time.